What's up everyone and welcome to Marvel Crisis Protocol 101 Inhumans, a series of videos that I'll be putting out about some techniques to use Inhumans competitively and level up your game as a MCP player. So today we're going to be looking at some key round 1 plays for Inhumans on even extracts on the center line. So this is mostly for Hammers and Skrulls, which are two extracts that I personally run in Inhumans because of their strength on them, which we're going to be looking at in a second. So in this example, we're going to be looking at Hammers first. Skrulls is 99% the same thing. We're just going to look at the minor differences after. And we're going to be looking at what happens when we're playing against someone with a safe extract play, first and foremost, because if they don't, you can just apply everything about when you have priority for the team and just do that and have success. So, in this particular game, which I'm using as a reference for this setup, it's a game I played in person against someone playing Strucker Hydra with a Sleeper Agent Angela, which meant that they did have a safe extract play. So that influenced my deployment a fair bit and led me to have this kind of setup, which we're going to look at in a second. So the deployment I went for is pretty simple actually. It's something I know I've said I was mostly, it's when with priority against someone with a safe extract play basically, or when you don't have priority against anyone, you're looking at the same kind of deployment. So what you're looking at is having two models on the table. I normally favor Sam and Crystal, especially if it's on a map that's going to be pretty spread out like this. These are going to be my two go-to safe extract plays. Beast will come in a bit less often. I'm normally on Crystal and Sam because of their potential for punishes on round 1, which we're going to look at a little bit later on. So the reason you want one in front of each extract, as I've done here, is because as long as your opponent hasn't deployed their Angela, you don't necessarily know which one they're going to threaten. So you just deploy safely, one in front of each. So even if they save Angela for their last model to deploy, we still are safely covering all of our bases. With priority, you will want to steal the one that they could be grabbing safely. So in this case, if Angelina is on this side, we want to grab this objective first, and that's the one that becomes our eyes on the prize priority. So we're going to look at what that leads to as in terms of board state. So to do it, you just use your leadership, transfer power from whoever is nearby, in this case Pyro, to Crystal, which means that Crystal has 2 power and can spend 1 on eyes on the prize, which means that she can then move and interact with N2, which with her long move lets her interact from a pretty nice position. Like, we run a shift to the other side, so we're really looking at getting as far away as we can on this side. So around here, pick up the hammer, and then move. We should be getting real close to the center line on our safe side, right? Look at that. Isn't it beautiful? If you had an extra power, you could even pick up this one, like similar to what a Sorcerer Supreme Strange can do on hammers, but this is still a great position as now our extract that was on this side and in danger of getting destroyed by Angela is now really safe in the center. Angela can still potentially double move and throw stuff at you, right? Potentially those pipes, but we're going to be in a much safer position overall. So once this is done, your opponent is going to be pretty forced at going for the other hammer, because if they don't, we can look at being extra cheeky, especially here with the turbine. We could have easily cover, which means that they would be in a really tough position to damage us if they don't go for it as soon as possible. So Strucker is likely activating next for them, going over here, picking up the hammer, right? This is pretty nice, simple, safe play for them. Safe-ish play, right? But mostly safe. What we'd be looking at on this map also is having the Smash Garden for uh, Miss Marvel with all those nice size trees right here, those size 2s. A lot of fun stuff to smash when she's unbig. But right now, we're not gonna look that deep into the game, but it would be something that's important. So once this is done, now if you look at the board state, our extract that we've picked on the side is here, while theirs is way more exposed. On that map, at least with the turbine, they get that nice little spot where they kind of get nudged in, so they don't get. They're gonna have cover, right? Which is gonna be really great for them against everyone except Sam. Sadly for them, Sam is the main model that's gonna be coming in and dealing damage, so it's not gonna be as great. But it's still gonna protect them from a few things. Alright, so after this, the rest of the turn, there's not that many and other things that we're gonna look at. I'm still gonna finish the round one real and like not necessarily in an optimal way, but just to give a general idea of what I'd be looking at for the board stage, right? So normally I'd activate Black Bolt next because we're not in any rush to go after Strucker, and that gives us the maximum efficiency on our leadership. Because if we go with Black Bolt, grab that armor, use the leadership to transfer a power from Miss Marvel to Sam, right? And then move Black Bolt again. The goal is to get within one, pretty much at the edge over here. That should not be an issue. Oops, just make sure you don't. This is something on TTS versus in person is always a bit easier to do in person, to not, and with your base on top of a terrain and within one. So, roughly like this, right? So this is gonna let us be in range for the next round. Of course, he's got cover, so that makes everything a bit more annoying. But generally speaking, we're looking at something like that. And using the leadership right away, this is the really important part. If you know you've got a move that's locked in, like in this case, it's going to be Sam's charge. Just swap the power as fast as possible, so that way if you've got other power to shift around later in the round, it might matter. We're going to look at it in a second. And let's say they just use Viper to camp that back canister, right? That kind of like seems like a logical decision. The only thing they probably would set up more aggressively, let's say they position roughly around here. And then we'd be looking at probably going with Sam at that point, right? But honestly, they probably aren't doing Viper and just doing Zola yet. If Zola isn't in range for rerolls, but he should be. Yes, he is, so that's fine. You probably want to go. Now you've got a few decisions, but normally I would look at charging with Sam and making sure I stay within 3 of Miss Marvel. And at the same time, still going to be within 4, right? That's not going to be an issue. These are the same thing. We've got the terrain being a little bit of an issue. So you just set up here. That's your charge. Then you roll some dices into Strucker. Considering Strucker's position, if you end up dealing damage, I would push him away. And try to get some, especially if you get a ricochet off to get into Solar. That's hard to say exactly what happens, right? You're trying 4 dices against, in this case, 4. So you might deal damage, you might not. So that comes out to extrapolate, but we're looking at potentially a push to get a ricochet off would be great. If it happens, you could get 3 power and a Strucker that's been pushed backwards a bit. In this case, if you were to get a push, you'd look at pushing him more towards the center. I know it sounds counterintuitive because you're setting him on the canister, but honestly, you just want to get him off of the objective and in a position where you're going to be able to punish him more next round. Potentially, the other thing you'd have to think about is think you'd be pushing him outside of, yeah. Okay, so if you're pushing him outside of Black Bolt's range, you would only push if you get a wild trigger, because then it would give you the power on Miss Marvel to throw Strucker. But otherwise, you just leave him there. If you don't get the wild and damage in, you just leave him there, deal hopefully some damage, gain some power, shift the power to Miss Marvel. That's the really important part, because that's gonna help Miss Marvel out for next round a lot. Because what we're looking at, let's say they move Arnim, it doesn't like it doesn't really matter the exact positioning. So we're gonna look at this with, like, say, Miss Marvel moving in, right? And then just throwing a 4-die shot again into Strucker. This time he's gonna have cover too, so probably not getting damage, dealing damage, but you're gaining a power, which is nice because now you'd have to look at stuff. Are you within 3? No, you're not. If you are, you can look at throwing him. If you get your wild, in this case, if you get your wild, you could push him in, and then you'd be in range, right, to throw him. So there's a lot of variations, and then depending on that, then if you throw him, I would probably look at throwing him like sideways a bit. Then you have to measure out to be sure that you don't throw him outside of Black Bolt's range, right? Like somewhere around there maybe, but then I think you might be blocking line of sight, so maybe you don't try him, to be honest, because of the terrain here. But you're looking at those options. Otherwise, you just keep her at 2 power. Make sure to swap one from Sam to Black Bolt so that he can do his empowered shot next round. Because Black Bolt, 5 dice is good. 7 is pretty darn scary, and once you reach 8 dice with the reroll and pierce, that's a ton of damage. That's a lot of damage. The nice thing now is Miss Marvel's gonna have 2 powers, so you're looking at next round are generating 2 from Infinity Formula, and then with the leadership you can get her to 5. 5 is the magic number because that lets you go for a Embiggen plus Smash play. So with those size 3s, we're looking at 2 8-dice strikes next round, which depending on, Strucker's help might be the plan, and especially that it's going to remove one of the turbines for cover purposes, right? So that's one line we're looking at, but you basically get the idea, right, of what we're looking at here for punishes. And then on this side, Pyro's going to be either reacting to, like, you've got 2 options with Pyro. You're either reacting to Angela if he commits Angela early. If you were to commit Angela early, we're looking at those kind of situations, right? Where, like, I'm guessing would be roughly this. She within medium, yes. See, so now she could throw this size 4, right? Which is what I thought would happen with this size 4. So if he does that before you have activated Pyro, because say he wants to wait on Zemo or something, right, then you react with Pyro, right? So Pyro can either go pick up the extract if Crystal got dazed, because he's not going to have power to pick it up, as the throw costs all of his power. And if you are to play before him, right, because say he saves Angela for last, you do a Pyro body block, where you're looking at placing Pyro in the throwing line, probably right here. So this way, if Angela comes over here in this area to throw the terrain, she's not going to be able to do it onto Crystal, right? So you're protecting your extra carrier. Sure, it exposes Pyro, but you know what? Gotta do what you gotta do. And ideally, though, in this case, it falls out perfectly, but you're outside of 2. So then Angela has some awkward decisions. And I don't think she was reaching far enough. Alright, let's just recheck real quick. Out of curiosity more than anything else, but I mean, Mm, let's say they probably really want to throw this before the fight gets too far away from it. Say they could really hard commit, get like somewhere around the air to be within 2 of Pyro, and throw the size 4. One thing to note, they're still not going to be within 2 of Crystal, which is really important because depending on what happens with this throw and the sequencing, right? If they do it as the last activation, if you've got the Pyro block, it's going to be different than if you've got Pyro left to activate before they've done it. Because if you wait for them to have thrown it into Crystal, then Pyro can just make sure he's outside of 2 of Angela, and then root and slower, ideally being at max 3, which in this case would be like around here. So you also have cover next round. So you move like around here, shooter, router, or just double move root if you can't attack and root, depending on the exact positioning Pyro was on. I don't remember where it was exactly. So if he doesn't reach this ideal spot, you can double move, use a power from Crystal, who probably took like 3, 4 damage, or 5. If she took 5, then you have to change your plans a bit, depending on where he drops the hammer, right? Because if you drop, no matter where he drops it, you just send Pyro on top of it and either pick it up if you can. Like if he sends it towards him, you can move, pick up, attack him. If he sends it more backwards, you probably just double move to pick it up next round, etc., etc. Right? There's some lines here that you have to look at based on this map specifically, right? The way it's set up. But ideally, if he saves her for last, you've got the Pyro block in. Or honestly, because all of his stuff isn't mattering on when Strucker activates. Whenever you feel like you can get the Pyro block in, you could look at getting it in and not look at the more complete board state, right? But this is all stuff that, depending on a game, will change. So it's hard to it's all speculation at that point, right? But generally speaking, right, we're looking at a situation where we're gonna have ideally this to protect the size 4 from going into Crystal, and we want those guys over here applying pressure on Strucker, and then this is gonna force Zemo to likely um, come in on that side. This is what we're hoping to happen, right? We want our opponent to feel pressured enough on Strucker that he goes like this, right? Or roughly like this. Zemo might be a bit differently placed depending on our opponent's decisions, but it's going to be somewhere around here on the objective and getting ready to fight on this side. Because if they send him towards this side instead, then it makes our decision for next round pretty simple. We just prioritize protecting Crystal and run away, right? If they send him over here, then we've got some interesting decisions to do about, do we want to work on protecting Crystal first? Are we going with Pyro? Like, we're probably going with Crystal at that point as our first action of round 2. You know, get her to safety. Ideally, you can set up to do a sneak shot in there, but it doesn't look like it's possible here. But, just get somewhere around here. Or you just accept the awkward trade with Angela. Like, you just accept that Angela's going to be murdering your models here a bit. And just commit into one of them with the Miss Marvel smash play. This is all going to depend on what's exactly happened with Strucker, right? Once you've got damage in and the exact sequencing of everything, how much damage you took over here from the Terra intro, etc. So at that point, it's hard to say exactly, but I think this showcases the kind of board state you're looking at, right? Which is your extract to be as safe as possible, so that your opponent has to run after it, which is gonna end forcing a fight on a side where you're gonna be pretty advantaged. And if you look at the round 1, our opponent got to do one throw, which is always annoying, but Angela is almost impossible to stop from throwing on round one when the opponent just double moves and throw. She normally can get somewhere, depending on the exact map, right? But over it was pretty easy. Um, but in exchange, we got 1, 2, 3 attacks in, maybe a throw, or we've generated also a bunch of power, and we're ready for a lot of violence on this side because we've got a Miss Marvel with 4 power, right? We've got a Black Bolt with 3, Sam with 2, with the Infinity Formula. So we've got a lot of offense coming in from this side. This is also one of the reasons Infinity Formula is in the list, right? It just really lets you get that kind of round 2, where with priority you can dish out a lot of damage. So this is basically what you want to do against someone that has a safe extract play. You want to force them to start chasing you. If you do fear that Angela is going to take over this side, you could also consider, right, shifting. Well, Miss Marvel's terrible at dealing with Angela, and Black Bolt's not the best either, right? It's just kind of annoying for Inhumans because of her no reroll clause. I try to more like run away from her more than try to fight her, which is why the Pyro Crystal setup is in front of her. The goal being that at some point you're gonna be able to run away. You probably do this, right? And hopefully, depending on what happens with the sequencing, Pyro can hopefully firewall her and run away at some point. And that's the end goal. Like, once she's firewalled, you can run away. The goal is to get that going, or if you can incinerate her, you can just push her off with pyrotechnics, anything to like basically make her life more miserable. And also, like, if you look at this map, once the size 4 is gone on this side, it's way less dangerous. Once Sleeper Agent is gone, because she's probably gonna whiff at some point, it also becomes easier, etc. I'm not gonna go too in depth. I've already been talking about it more than I planned to on the potentials with Angela, but I think that pretty much sums up the basic concepts that we're looking at. So we're just gonna reset a little bit the stuff here and look at if we don't have prio, what we're looking at instead, right? Which is gonna be the same deployment. We're just gonna do the same one. It's the same concept. The difference is we want to be on both sides because instead of being able to snag from Angela the safe extract and force this more favorable board state, we instead are looking at making sure that whichever side she went for, that we're still able to go on the other one, right? So in this case, we're looking at something that's sure there's a size 4 here, but it's going to be irrelevant in this case. Just reset the power to show what it looks like. So, and on this side, we're back at 1. Okay, that's why we're still deploying the same. We still have eyes on the prize. And our opponent has priority, right? Which is something that can happen. Especially that specific scenario combination. I think both teams might be running them, so it wouldn't be that surprising. So normally you're gonna have Angela doing her thing, where she grabs the thing and runs away. Right, so let's say the opponent does it a bit like we do, except this time, because they know we also have a safe extract play, there's gonna be no one in the center, so you're probably fine just chilling over here normally, right? This is going to be pretty standard, so this is a pretty standard play. We don't have anyone that's going to be really able to attack her, but we do have Pyro, and that's where the Pyro punish comes in. When you don't have priority, ideally Pyro is the model that you set up to be punishing your opponent extracts runner. Because if they run away, especially on a B map, where they're going to stand there, you can just shift the power from Crystal to Pyro. And then Pyro can double move. Maybe not as your first action, right? I'm just showing it because the first action is gonna be the yeah. Let's just do this properly. So it's not gonna be your first action, anyway. So the first action is still gonna be the safe extract play. So still taking a power off of Medusa, giving it to Sam, so that Sam can go. Get over here, and this time because our opponent doesn't have like anything really with infinite threat range outside of Angela, we don't need to run as far back and try to, minimize the damage. We can instead simply go and stand over here, similar to what our opponent is doing, right? And it makes sense. You're still in the secure. You're safe from pretty much anyone on round one. Everything's kind of nice in this setup. The one thing that you'd be looking at after, well, is the Pyro Punish, right? So our opponent, let's say, just does a whatever move. Also, now that I look at it, this is probably not the best deployment from the Hydra player if it were like a real game. But let's say they just go over here, right? As their next action, and then you could look at the Pyro Punish. Maybe right away, maybe you wait for Viper to activate. It doesn't super matter because now we've got two options. We're looking at generating pressure. So what you want to identify is where is your opponent's slowest model. In this case, it's Arnim Zola, and he's on this side, far away. He's on the wrong side, right? Which is why if our opponent had been good at this game, he would have swapped Viper and Zola's position. Let's just do that actually, because whatever. Let's do it because it doesn't make sense otherwise. Let's say they went like this, which is a much better deployment. And then they might have just sent Viper over here, because why not? Viper is happy to just sit over here and be doing not much. Let's say our opponent's kind of like deployed like that. Now we're just gonna wait for like Zola to activate ideally by doing other stuff. What we're looking at doing now is applying pressure on Angela, which is not the easiest thing to do in the world, but or Zemo once he picks up the hammer and goes somewhere. So we want to try to force the fight. In this case, looking at the terrain, like the fact that there's not really anything on this side, I think there was something earlier and it got destroyed when I was recording earlier and got some issues. But let's say Black Bolt goes over here, picks up this hammer, and basically he's just looking at getting within 4 of Angela. Like, this is all we want Black Bolt to do. Right. And then Zola might move, because of where Angela is, he can't go after Black Bolt, because she's basically where you need to stand, and he can get around her. Say goes over here. And then what we're looking at is the Pyro setup, which is when you take a power from someone and give it to Pyron for the first round. He's the one that whenever your opponent has a mobile model with an objective, like in this case Angela, you want to look at punishing this by slowing them down. So that's when Firewall comes in, so you would double move, get into position, Firewall Angela. Should have a power left. Firewalling Angela, which is going to slow her and root her. What that accomplishes is that now Angela is in a much more awkward position to run away. If that was our opponent's plan, right? If they want to try to shift the fight on this side of the board, she's going to have a hard time doing it. Of course, this is Trucker's leadership, so the strategy is not as ideal, and it's not the best example, but generally speaking, that's a strategy you want to use. And even against Trucker, it's probably still worth doing, but It's a bit trickier. And then the rest doesn't really matter as much. We're gonna basically just they might then go, well, Strucker's now feeling like ideally if they use Strucker to like stand there, you've probably won the game. If they think about it for a second, they probably would have shifted him more around this side, finishing because of size 3 probably around there. Oops. If they do this, it's better for them because they should properly identify that we're going for this section of the board. If they do and rotate Striker, means you're playing against a opponent that properly identified the situation, and it's going to be a tougher game because then they're probably going to be also shifting this guy. I'm just going to move everyone into like there. I'm going to do the turn by turn thing. But if Zemo also shifts around here, that's also the thing, right? You probably want to wait on the pyro play as your last activation, right? Ideally, like I know I've done it already because if they move Zemo in this kind of spot, you'd rather do Zemo. Probably rather do Zemo, but you might do Angela. Anyways, you want to fire one of them to make sure that their life is a bit more miserable. Let's say you've got after Angela, because that's the one you were after. Group, but you could also consider waiting, and basically you want to make sure you grab one of the extract holders with firewall to make their life a bit less effective. Right, and then you just want to shift everyone else in a good position for next round. The one interesting thing, if they move Zemo forward to threaten more like Pyro, you now probably get some value into him with Crystal potentially, right? So that's something to consider. The shit was in a single move action. I wasn't paying attention. Yep. So you know you get some free real estate with a shot over here. Another interesting play. If you reach Angela, depending on the exact position they're in, you could look at shooting her. But normally, if you can shoot someone, you're happy. Like in this case, it would be Sola or Zemo now that he's closer. Or in this case, you'd beam Zemo because he's close enough, etc. But basically, generate a bit of offense, which means that on run 1, your opponent has done 0 attacks, 0 throws, and you've done 1 attack. It's not crazy, but it's better than nothing. And you've got some statuses on to your opponent's models. Your position pretty great. Your overall position a bit better than your opponent if you look at the board state, right? Because Strucker is going to be pretty inefficient next round. He's going to be moving and attacking, while every single one of your model is likely attacking twice. Miss Marvel might need a bit more shenanigans because to embiggen and get there, but or if they move forward towards you with their close range attackers, and Miss Marvel's going to be in a nice position. But if you look at it, and Sam's kind of far, but at the same time, with charge, he's going to be in the action, right? He's going to likely move, and then if your opponent has moved in closer, you're already shooting. If they haven't, you just go move, charge. You might also go and do a move airlift onto, say, Miss Marvel to position her better, and then move again, etc. You've got a lot of nice options with Sam because Sam is an insanely strong model that has always a billion options. And then you've got all of your other models here ready to rumble. Your opponent is in a slightly worse position if you look at it, and that's against someone with a safe extract play. If they don't have a safe extract play, it's going to be really similar to what happened with Strucker, except that you get to choose which side to do it on. So in this case, you would pick up on the side with the nice cover, and then force them into the open, and then murder them. So that's what I wanted to cover in this video. Feel free to comment, subscribe for the future videos, and give me some feedback about if everything was clear. There's probably going to be also a quick part 2 for covering a few of the other shapes. We're also going to look at Skrulls real quick. Just going to put it on for the deployment. So just put Skrulls on for a second. And that's Skrulls is the one where you want 3 models with safe extract place, with the same range for extract place, right? Because let's just add beast for a second, just to explain. So if you look at it, here maybe the terrain messes it up. We'll see. Let's say you've got this guy over here, beast over here, Sam over here. Crystal could move. She should still be able to make it. Yes. So, right, Crystal or any long mover is going to be the one doing the midline, especially when there's a little wheel like this, because I'm not sure Beast would reach, and then Beast could. Okay, see, so in this case with the turbines, we need to do the other way around. That's something you always want to take the time to look at in a game, but see, because Beast is a bit more limited on the placement, that's one of the things I wanted to mention, so that's a great example. When you do those plays, Beast is always a bit more limited because he relies on his base size, so terrain can limit him a bit more, right? Because like if we look, Sam can reach no issues because he's going to be able to stand onto the turbine, pick it up, and then move back, right? Beast is able to do it as long as there's not too many things in the way. He does have wall crawlers, so a big terrain like over here is not an issue, but like if it's on the landing spot, the landing spots are a bit more tricky. So you could also do it on this side, pick up and move back. Crystal, like, or any other long mover could do it in the center. One thing to note, Beast normally can do it, but same thing. I'm pretty sure I have a feeling the terrain's gonna stop it here. I'm gonna look at it just to be sure. But this sounds like a map where the terrain would prevent Beast from doing it in the center. I might be wrong, but I have a feeling, right? Looks a little wrong. Looks a little off. Yep. Making short a little bit. Yes, because of the terrain, right? So if this wheel wasn't there, let's just delete it. Beast would be able to do it to the midline without eyes on the prize, which is important to know because depending on the exact situation, this is a kind of deployment that can be pretty nice to do also. But then again, this one is way more terrain dependent. Right? You've got some leeway, but it's more limited, right? So same concept, you want to be able to threaten both sides and the middle. So you get your center safely with either one of the 3 depending on terrain, and a side one based on terrain also. And if you have prio or not, and if your opponent has a safe extract or not, right? Because if your opponent has Angela, we want to apply the same concept of bringing all 3 and covering all 3 bases with prio and without prio. If they don't have Angela and don't have a safe extract play, you could bring only 2 of them and just know, okay, I'm gonna say, for instance, you go like, this is the one I want to pick up safely, then you could, and you know, like, say for instance, if your opponent doesn't have a safe extract play, you could bring only 2 of them, because you could set up this way, for instance, and be like, well, Crystal's gonna go for this one, Sam's gonna go for this one, this is gonna be my first action, second action, and that's it, right? Call it a day. If your opponent doesn't have a model like Angela. If they do, then you probably want to bring the third one with prio to force this awkward board state where they have a weak side and you don't. Um, so that pretty much covers it for Skrull. It's just the same thing, but you need a third one. Um, Against a safe extract play, or if you don't have prio, because same thing, if you don't have prio and you want to make sure to have your safe play, even if they don't have a safe play, you still want to have your tree model set up, because if they choose to go for this one, which would make sense considering the board position, and assuming you don't have prio, you probably want to be set up like this. Assuming a board state where they would go for this one, you would go for this one, but you still want your safe extract play, because if they don't have one, they still have a model exposed. And if they chose to go for the worst one, then you're just happy because you get the better one for yourself. So you have a even worse board position, right? And if they have a safe extract play, you absolutely need um, to either punish them with prio to make sure they don't get one and still force the awkward board position, etc. Right, as I've mentioned before. So, yeah, that should be it for the Ice on the Prize on even extract plays. I'm gonna make another video looking at more like the when there's only a center one. But this is pretty basic because then you just grab it if you have prio, and if you don't, then you just bring extract chasers instead. But we're gonna look at that in another video because this one's already running longer than I wanted. So feel free to give me some feedback on how you found the information and if there's anything else I should adjust for the future. So thanks for watching and have a great day.